Alrighty, to get started, we're going to begin modeling the main interior structure. This means the floors, the wall, the ceiling, the opening for the large windows, and the stairwell. This is actually going to be really simple, but we want to be sure that we take these first steps very carefully because they're going to set the way for the rest of the entire project. In particular, this means modeling to real-world scale, or at least a relative scale that then you can base the scale of everything else in the scene off of. Since we're doing a interior architectural visualization, we want it to feel natural. And one of the most important things to obviously feeling natural is to feel like everything is correctly scaled. This means, making sure that the height of the room is accurate to, say, the size of the desk or the chair or the stairs. You want to be able to feel as if you could walk into the room and sit down and not have to be sitting in a giant's chair or, scrunching down through a tiny little ceiling or anything like that. We want to make sure that everything is to scale. And so we're going to be modeling in real-world scale using the metric system. And for those of you, all of you that are in the US, including myself, I know that this can be a little scary at times because most of us grew up with the imperial system, as dumb as it is. Being a US citizen, I completely agree that we should go to the metric system, but of course that is a issue for another day and another debate. But for this project, we're going to be using the metric system and converting many standard units in the US as far as like stair sizes, window sizes, things like that, and converting them to the metric system simply because the metric system works much nicer within Blender. Even though Blender has a unit system, such as if you go over to the scene settings here, and you look at the units between none, metric, and imperial, metric and none, there's really not a big difference. It's more just whether or not how it displays them, because the default units in Blender are basically the same as the metric system, where one Blender unit equals 1 meter. And so we're just going to leave it at the default, because not everything in Blender plays well by changing over to a metric or an imperial system. We're just going to use none, let it use the Blender system, but interpret everything in centimeters and meters, and converting things, if needed, between, say, inches and feet. So, to get started, let's go ahead and create the floor. So what I want to do is, let's first just go ahead and get rid of these two objects here, the cube and the lamp. So we're just going to select them, just control left click and drag across. I'm going to hit X and delete. Now we can leave the camera because we don't really, we're going to need it later on, but we don't really care about it at the time being. So I'm just going to leave it where it's at, but let's just hit the eye in the outliner to hide it, just so that we can focus exclusively on our model. Now what I want to do is I want to go and hit Shift A, add in a mesh and a plane. And this plane is going to represent the size of our floor. And the size of the floor that we're going to be using is going to be length times width is 6 by 9. So it's going to, width times length. So it's going to be 9 meters long and 6 meters deep. So the easiest way to do this right off the bat is just hit N to bring up the properties panel. Scroll up to the top, so you can just kind of hide most of these panels here, and you can just toggle any one of these panels down by pressing A on your keyboard. And we're just going to change the dimensions right here. So let's go ahead and just set the X dimension, which I like X to be either left and right, basically. And so this is going to be our length, where the room is basically going to be like this. So then the windows will be essentially over here. So these are the windows coming down. This then is the floor, and floor. So we're going to do length times depth. So our length, again, is 9 meters. So let's just change the dimensions to 9 by 6. And that gives us the exact size of our floor that we want to use. And in order to make this a little bit easier, one thing that I want to try and do is always keep things within the grid units if possible. And right now you'll notice that basically we are in the grid units, except that we're overlapping half a unit on this side, half a unit on this side. Not a big deal, but just to make things really clean and whatnot, I'm going to go ahead and change that by just hitting Tab to go into edit mode. I'm going to select everything, and I'm going to hit G to go into grab mode, X to lock it to the X-axis, and then negative 0.5, just to move it over half of a meter such that it's exactly aligned with the grid units. And then I'm going to hit tab to leave edit mode. Now, this is the size of our floor. However, we need to go ahead and look at something, because something that you'll notice is since we've changed the dimensions, what this has actually done is basically just scaled the object up to fit within this size. And scaled the bounding box. Now, the bounding box on a plane is just a plane, and so this works great. But you'll notice if we look at this scale here, and this is actually very important because it could cause problems later, you'll notice that the scale is 4.5 times 3 and 1. So what this has actually done is scaled the object such that if we go into edit mode, scroll down under the mesh display section and enable the edge length, you may remember that this edge here is supposed to be 9 meters long. So if we selected this edge, it should say 9 meters, right? Wrong. If we select this, you'll notice that it shows, I know it's hard to read because the edge display is rough in Blender, but you'll see that it reads 2. And this is because this is the original size of our plane when we added it. And if you scale an object in object mode, such as we did with the dimensions, it does not actually change the length of the edges. As far as Blender is concerned, this edge is still only 2 meters long, but we've basically just distorted it to be longer. So to bring this full circle, we just need to be aware of this and how to fix it. The way we fix it is crazy easy. We just hit Control A and apply the scale. And now you'll notice that the scale has gone back to 1, 1, and 1. If we hit tab to go into edit mode, we select this, we can see that it reads 9. Now I realize again that's hard to read, but it does actually say 9. If we were to select this one here, it says 6, 9, and 6. So this is all we needed to do. But just be aware of that, because otherwise it can cause some pretty serious problems later down the road with any number of things. All right, with all of that said and done, let's go ahead and start preparing our scene. So what I want to do is I want to add in the stairwell, or basically I want to plan out where things are going to be. Well, we know that our windows are going to be over here, the side walls here, and the stairwell is probably going to be somewhere right in here. So let's go ahead and do exactly that. Let's first cut in the stairwell. With this kind of scene, with an architectural visualization, it's a very good idea to have a solid understanding of what you're making before you start modeling. Even if this is merely based on a sketch, based on a reference photo, a photo you took, whatever your reference is, it's a good idea to have this simply to know what you're actually making so that you can just model. For most people, and not for everyone, but for a lot of us, modeling is great. I mean, I love modeling. I live for modeling, basically. But making design decisions during modeling is much slower than making design decisions during, say, sketching or looking for photo references. If you have a reference already on hand that has pretty much what you want, or maybe a collection of references, then the modeling process is likely to be much easier. So in this case, we already know what we're creating because of the reference that I've shown you, which are original final reference or render, which is this here. This is our final render. And so we are just recreating this. I'm taking you through all the steps to model this actual scene. And as far as the actual planning for this scene, I did exactly what we've just been talking about, is I collected a bunch of reference photos and went through and, tried out a bunch of different designs that I liked and finally came up with this design. Now, as far as coming up with that design, this is something that everyone kind of has to find their own way to do it or what works for them. The most crucial thing for this design was simply finding a few reference photos that I really liked, elements that I liked in photos, and adapting those. Now, unfortunately, I can't share those with this project simply because they're not licensed appropriately. But that's really not the important thing in this case, because in the end, what we're creating is simply something that I liked the design and I developed further, And now we're looking at how to actually go through creating that. So, if you wanted to create an interior loft space, or let's say an alleyway or anything like that, find those reference photos, and Flickr is a great place to find them. Find those references that you like and start taking elements from each one of those. So to quit blabbing, let's go ahead and put in the stairwell. So the stairwell that we're going to be making is basically going to be cut in like this, where we can kind of imagine that this is a loft space where it has large windows coming up like this. So it's very well lit, very roomy, very nice. And we want the stairs kind of coming up from a lower level up through right in here. So the stairs that I'm going to do, we're going to position it from the left, from the wall right here, 3 meters in. 3 meters then will give, pretty ample space for, say, like a desk or a workstation right in here. So at 3 meters, we want a vertex. And then at the actual stair width is going to be 1.5 meters. And so we're going to put a vertex basically right here and right here to then cut in the wall. So probably the easiest way to do this is just first go ahead and select this edge here, hit W and subdivide. Then I'm going to grab this vertex here. I'm just going to move it over right in here. And then I'm going to hit Shift S and selection to grid. And that will just lock it right to the grid unit there, which is exactly 3 meters from this point here. So then we can delete this, and we're going to go ahead and select this, and we're going to hit W and subdivide again. And this time we're going to just move this over. You can see that it's positioned it exactly on this grid unit, and it's actually right in between this because this is 6 meters long from here to here. And so this vertex is positioned exactly at 6 meters. And so we can simply just hit G, X, and negative 1.5. So 1.5 negative, and that will position it exactly right there. And now this edge length is 1.5 meters. And that's exactly what we want. Get rid of my grease pencil there. Okay. The next thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and bring this unit out like this. And you'll notice obviously that this is an N-gon yet again. And so, this is an example of the B-mesh modeling system that I gave you the previous introduction to, where even though I've added 2 vertices right here, I haven't added any triangles in here. So I've still got a very nice clean mesh, and it's going to work very nicely. So what I want to do now is I'm going to use what's called it's the knife tool, or the new knife tool. And this is another tool that's included in B-mesh that is new to Blender. I didn't cover it in the previous video, but I'm going to go ahead and cover it now. And the way that we access it is we just hit K to bring up the knife tool. You can now see I have this little green square that follows my cursor around. And if I were to click or hover over any one of these vertices, click and drag out, or just click and move my mouse out, you'll see that it drags another line out followed by a green dot. And this is a where I can basically cut in a new edge. So what I'm going to do is now just press C, and that will constrain this cut based on the view. So in this case, I want to be in top view, and it's going to constrain this cut to angles. So I can just take it straight out, and I want the depth of my stairwell to be 2. So I'm just going to pull this out and cut right there, and then I can immediately just draw out again and click, and one more time, and hover over this vertex. You'll notice it turns red to indicate that it's snapped to that, and click again, and then hit enter. And now you'll see what's happened is that I still have my main N-gon right here, and I now have an interior N-gon that is creating my staircase. Now I need to go ahead and align these a little bit, where I want to make sure that these two are aligned and these are perfectly aligned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into vertex snapping mode, which we can do right down here. I'm just going to change this into vertex. I'm going to grab this vertex. I'm going to hit G and X to lock it to the X-axis. Hold down Control, snap to right there. Now, the other way that I could do this, rather than using the vertex snap, is I could simply select these 2 vertices, hit Shift S, and selection a grid. And since they were really close to that grid unit, it's just snapped perfectly right there. And then all I need to do is I'm going to just select this, and I'm going to hit E to extrude and take it straight down. Now, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and make my stair depth 1.44 along the negative axis. And this is just the depth of my previous one. That results in a good stair height. But really this, it doesn't really matter what this is. You could actually go ahead and make this say 1.5 and then hit enter. And that will work. Now, we're going to leave this hole or this face just like this. The reason being is that when we illuminate our scene, if we put our light, say over here, and it's illuminating down like this, and it's casting shadows down like that, that's going to be all fine and dandy. But once we go in and add in, say, global illumination, what we don't want is we don't want any light coming up from the bottom through the stairs. We want to assume that that's another interior room and not an exterior. So we just need to be sure that that's capped off, or else from the camera view, say like right in here, you would actually see light coming up like this, and we want to avoid that. All right, this gives us our stairwell and our floor. So now let's go ahead and work on the walls and the ceiling. So for the walls and the ceiling, I'm just going to select all of these exterior edges like this, and then I'm going to extrude it up to the height of the full ceiling. And the ceiling at the highest point is going to be 4 meters. So I'll just hit E to extrude, Z to lock it to the Z axis, and hit 4 on my number pad, and then hit enter. And that extrudes it up 4 meters. Now I can go ahead and, for one, save my file, and I will also fill this in with an ingon. So I'll just hit F to fill that, and it works good. Okay, now, one more thing. Since we're working in beam mesh, we don't need these edges here. So let's just select these two vertices, hit X and dissolve, and you'll see that case, it has not worked because it's kind of just merged them away. So what I'm going to do instead, and this is one of those times where, the dissolve is not always going to know exactly how to interpret the data. So instead, let's go into edge mode, and we'll select this edge, hit X, dissolve, and that's not wanting to work out. We'll do this one. Select this edge, hit X, dissolve, this one, dissolve, then switch into vertex mode, and dissolve each one of these vertices one at a time. And then it gives us a nice clean result. And so you can see how we basically just have a vertex and an edge at only the critical points where we absolutely need one. If we wanted, we could even remove this edge here. But I don't really want to do that just because I like to be able to have a single face for the entire back wall, side wall, and then back wall of the stairwell. This just gives me a little bit more control. If I wanted to add an edge loop up like this, then I can, or say one like this, then I can, no problem. Where this is basically a path of edges and this is a path of faces, whereas before, otherwise it would not be. All right, now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and move, or we want to define the angle of where these windows are going to be. And the easiest way to do that is by using the measurements that I have from my original model, which is again is this one right here. The ceiling is 9 by let me double check, 9 by 4, 4 1/4 in yet again meters. And so if we simply select this edge, you know that this edge is 6 meters long. If we just select this edge and move it in 1 3/4 meters by just hitting G, Y, 1.75, and then hit negative to go in the opposite direction, then that will give us the exact angle that we want, and we can just hit enter. So this then is the angle of our windows. And if we just hit 5 to go into perspective mode, zoom in here, and kind of say move in like this, you can kind of see that that's going to be our rough camera position that we want to use. So at this point, this is our primary structure, and I'm going to go ahead and just save our file now, and we're ready to go ahead and move in on the next part.